you.
Yep, ready when you are.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Mocyk. I'm one of the instructional designers on campus. Today's session, we're going to explore Brightspace a little bit more through the lens of digital accessibility and ways we can create content that is more accessible to all. Um, so we're going to get started by going through some of the different components of Brightspace, and then we'll go into actually applying some of these principles. All right. On the content side of things, the side where the students interact with the materials within the course, we have the ability to use these different options. And you can upload files, which is pretty common, and the upload a video or audio, that's common too, and then create a file. Those are probably the three most common ones that are used, but I did want to talk about that. So upload a file. It's convenient, but one of the things about it is if you were to upload this, you're kind of shifting the accessibility responsibility onto the uploader. So it's really important for like Word docs, PDFs, PowerPoints, Excel files. The accessibility of it really relies on what you've uploaded. And for this reason, if the file isn't accessible before the upload, it won't become magically accessible after the upload. That means, the headings could be missing, the alt text could be missing, color contrast, anything that's in there as it's uploaded. It may not be caught in the same degree if it was shared in a different way, and we'll talk about what that means. So the drawbacks to using upload a file is once the file is uploaded, it's harder to fix the accessibility issues after. You usually have to download it, fix everything, and then re-upload it, right? Um, and yeah, the editing of the file and making sure the students, you'll now have multiple versions of this file every time you upload it. And it does get saved to your course too. So then you have to remember to keep track of that. So whenever possible, reserve upload file for documents that truly need to be downloaded, and run the accessibility checker before you upload that file, just so that um, the students have the most accessible version of the file. All right, the video and audio. This one is kind of interesting because it would seem this would be the one that you would want to use. But with digital accessibility, we would like to have the transcript below the audio, the video file. And this design does not necessarily allow that to happen easily. There's a better way to go about this. So we really don't recommend that you use this component here. What we really want you to use is create a file. And create a file gives you that text box that allows you to add anything that you want in. And then there's this thing called insert stuff. And this is where you could insert a link from YouTube. You can insert, if you're familiar with the media library, which if you're not familiar, you should learn a bit more about. If they have it on your computer, you can upload your videos from here by using this insert stuff. And what that allows you to do is to have an introduction to the video up top, and then include the video in there, and then have the transcript copy pasted below in a usable form. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a little bit. But there's a reason that we recommend to create a file. It is the most, it's going to give you the best opportunity to provide accessible content, whether it's the video or anything else. Yeah, so this HTML content, which is what they call this here, several built-in advantages. They remove a lot of guesswork for faculty. They reduce the barriers for the students. It also asks you along the way to make things more accessible. So like if you're adding a video, an image, it asks you for the alt text as you're building it. Create a file is easier to fix at a later time, offers a better viewing and user experience for the students. If it needs to be fixed, you just edit it directly there. There's no re-uploading, no broken links to worry about, no version confusion. And it does allow you to embed caption videos. You can add descriptive links in here, control the reading order. Like there's a lot that you can do in here. And it also has the built-in accessibility checker, which is great, but we'll talk about what that means. And finally, there's these templates, and I'm going to go show you some of these things. I'm not sure if anyone has ever played around with these templates up here, but there are some templates, and they are built with accessibility in mind. So this module introduction being one of them. If you look here, it is already identified as a heading 1. So this is really helpful, keeps you in line to make sure that you are using heading 1s and 2s. It has some numbering in here if you do want to be using this for the purpose of learning objectives, but you could use this. You could change out this, this phrase to anything that you wanted. My recommendation as I'm working through here is I highlight this and then I do the copy paste of whatever you wanted in this area. Warning about templates is once you break them, they are hard to pull back. And what I mean by breaking is if I were to accidentally delete something and something goes out of order, it is hard to pull back sometimes. So it is a little bit of an advanced component. However, it definitely looks very nice and also addresses accessibility as you're going through. And you'll see that there's a video lecture page. So looking at that one, if you were to have any videos, it sizes it properly for you. And again, it has these built-in features in it. That being said, if you are new to Brightspace or nervous about using the templates, you don't have to. It's just something that we haven't spoken about a lot in the past, but it is available for you if you're comfortable with playing around with those. Within this toolbar, we've got the insert the link. And let's see. So I could copy a link in here and it's going to ask you what the text would be. You want to make sure that that's going to be descriptive. So instead of, Brightspace, it would be Brightspace at Oswego, something like that. That's more descriptive. Really want to make sure that there's no lost message. You want to avoid that click here, anything like that that would prevent the user from knowing where they're going next. So using the create a link from this toolbar here will give you that opportunity to add that in. And then also this here is where the insert an image. If you were to, let's see, I'm afraid to do this. If you were to upload an image here, it's going to pop up immediately and ask you to do the alt image. Let me just stop my screen share for 1 second. I just want to make sure that I'm lined up properly to show you that. My apologies for messing that up. Okay, perfect. I am. Okay. There you all are. Okay. So let's add an image in here so we can see what that looks like. That does not look right. There we go. All right, so I'm going to, I pulled that from my content. Let's see. Link to text, alternative text. Okay. I'm going to say students in a classroom because that's what this is. Is it going to let me do that? It wants the link text. I haven't done this in a little while. I apologize. And my mouse does not want to work with me. Okay. So I have this image in here and I put an alt text in here. Students in a classroom. Sure, whatever you want. Um, but I kind of wanted to talk about this because in this image, I put an alt text of students in a classroom. But the real question is this actually descriptive enough for someone who is relying on a screen reader to tell them what's going on? So like taking a look at it, what do what kind of class do you think this is? Is this high school? Is this college? Do you think it's a language class? Do you think it's a math class? Like all these kind of information, it could be very important depending on what's going on with, what the purpose of this image is serving. So using the alt text is very important inside of Brightspace, but also recognizing that what you put in as the alt text is just as important so that there isn't a lost message. Because this image is definitely saying a lot more than students in the classroom. All right, so I'm going to get out of this template that I realize that I'm in. I'll just cancel out and just open up a new page. Okay, so going through the toolbar here, we have the headings, and this allows the screen reader to jump from section to section within the course. If you think about this from the syllabus standpoint, the most important feature or most important piece is going to be the heading 1. And then, so like syllabus would be heading 1, and then heading 2 would be the different major topics within the syllabus. And then if there's anything that was inside of that, that would be a subtopic. Every time you indent in, if you think about it like an outline, that's when these headings typically change. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a moment. Okay, so I think I've caught all of those. Let me just review my notes real quick. Okay. So the biggest takeaway from this is that using Create a File for all of your purposes is probably going to offer the most organic, more accessible options than a lot of these other ones. There are definitely ways to make things work for you, but just as a standard guideline, Create a File will do more for you. All right, so what I've done is I've created this module. This is something older. And I wanted to kind of go through a couple of these. This is an assignment description, and I'll make this bigger so we can look at it. Okay, and what I did is I went through, do you want me to zoom this in a little bit more? Seems small. Okay. All right. So what I did is I took away all of the headings and the accessibility features that go on this page. So to get started with it, I'm going to identify the headings that I know exist. Right now, it looks like a whole bunch of words. It'd be very easy to get lost within these paragraphs because it's not formatted in a way that's easily scannable. So my heading is going to be an Oswego at its finest. So I'm going to mark that. Oops, and these are things that happened. This happens. I'll show you what to do right now. Right now it's saying this whole paragraph is a heading 1. So I'm just going to go up here and change this to paragraph. And it's not going to let me do that. Okay, so I pressed enter. Now I'll go and make that a heading 1. All right, so this is an assignment. So I have instructions here. So let me press enter and get this on its own line so it plays nice with me. And my instructions, I will also call, I could call it a heading 1, I could call it a heading 2. I'll go with heading 2 in this instance. I'll count this kind of like the title of the page, and then instructions being kind of a subtopic of the title or a topic of the title. Okay, so I have these instructions, but I'm looking at this and I'm going, what is going on here? It's hard to keep track of what's happening. This is where some of the other accessibility features can come into play. So we're researching online using TripAdvisor, find activities in the area. All right, that's fine. Identify 3 activities or events that interest you. Okay. So then it gets into more about what is being required of the students. We're going to write a 5-paragraph essay. The essay should include activities and events that you found and why those events interest you. We want them to use a particular setup. So we could break this up a few different ways, but for this purpose, this will be fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a bulleted list. And using that bulleted list up top here allows it to just be more easily scannable. So the students can be like, yep, I did that, I did that, I did that, like a checklist. And actually, I could probably do one more here. And now I just took those 2 paragraphs that were, just it was hard to navigate, to read through, to keep track of what was being asked, and made it into a more reasonable means of making sure that they've caught everything that's being asked of them. Okay. So since we're talking about bullets and lists, I want to show you one other thing. If you run into a situation where the bullet isn't where you want it to be, there is the decrease indent option or the increase indent. So let's say this is not the right way to go about it, but if you wanted to indent this further, you could. All right. So that's how you make that happen without using the space buttons to move you through. Okay. So that looks a lot more manageable for a student to work through. Let's take a look at this one. All right, so why Oswego? I'm going to use that as my title. And I'll just highlight this and I will mark it a heading 1. And for this instructions, actually, I think I can just have it there. Yeah, you can just have your cursor. I'm in the habit of highlighting it all, but as long as your cursor is where it belongs, um, it will create that heading 2 for you. All right, so in this case, there are 2 groups. You can decide which group you'd like to work with, work to develop a collaborative answer to the question below. Group question prompt. Oh, that looks like a third one. Okay. So this was my title. That was my heading 1. This was my instructions. Um, you could argue either way. You could call this a heading 2. You could call this a heading 3, depending on, how you view it. Now, the big thing about like where you make these decisions, it's just a matter of allowing it to tab through these different sections. So, you can make some judgment calls, and as long as you're going from heading 1 being the most important to heading 2 being pretty important to heading 3 being nested inside of heading 2, you can kind of make some judgment calls with it. That part is not as big of a deal as if you don't have them at all, which would require the student to read through the entire document in order to get to the part they're looking for. These headings allow them to skip through. All right, so in these instructions, there's 2 groups. We could create a bulleted list here. You can decide which group you'd like to work with, work to develop to answer the question below. So we could call that a bulleted list. And then we have the prompt here. Why SUNY Oswego? Why did you come here? How would you encourage somebody else? So again, if we wanted to, becomes very clear, easy to understand what's being asked of them to pull this as a list. Now, obviously, if I undo what I have here and I wanted to start from the beginning as I was typing to create my list, I could do that, if I was typing through. So those are the that again, very clear, very easy to understand what's being asked of them. Everybody gets to benefit from this layout, and you're making it more accessible for those relying on a screen reader. Okay. One thing we haven't talked about, and let me just go into a random page, is color. You'll notice that, let's see, let's get out of this. Okay. So you'll notice that there's some different options with color inside of Brightspace. When you are in this toolbar, so I did create a file, the same place I told you to go for pretty much everything. There's the color option here. If you are trying to determine what color you can and can't be using, this here will tell you that it passes. So black on a white background passes in a small contrast and also a large contrast. But you'll also notice, like if you've ever heard of colors that you're supposed to use. So you've got the SUNY Oswego green that you're supposed to use. If you wanted to be able to use that inside of your course, you could actually look up the hex code for the SUNY Oswego green, which can be found on the marketing page. You could change out the color here, and again, it will tell you whether or not you can use it in small print if it's accessible or if it needs to be in a larger print. So this information tells you a lot. So let's just say here. So I used a very light blue up on the top there, and it is telling me it does not pass with a white background. It does not pass at all in small print or large print. Okay, so if you haven't played around with this, it is nice. I believe this is the Oswego green here that I've saved, but don't quote me on that. I'd have to look. I haven't used that in a little while. But it does pass in both, um, small print and large print. All right. Let me just look through, make sure I've covered everything. Oh, that goes so the use of color. Um, we do have the options. There is a highlighter color in here. We don't necessarily recommend it too much. We want to really think about why you want to be using color in the first place. If the color is relaying a message of any sort, then that is not the appropriate use of color. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you've ever received, if you're my age or older and you had those the red pen that told you that you failed an exam. What did the red pen? You watched everyone's papers get handed back to them, and you looked for red pen on your paper because you knew that it probably meant you did poorly on an exam. So there was a message with that red pen, intended or not, that was the message. So you have to think about that with accessibility, because those are the things that people miss out on. If that red pen, or even if it's green pen or blue pen that just says that you passed it 100%, if they can't see the color, then there's a message that's lost throughout with that use of color. So always be really careful with color. I know that it can make things stand out, but it should not be the only form of sharing information. So like a common example that we have, we'll use charts. So you can have the red line to demonstrate on a graph that something is how that bell curve is working, but also use dots, do a dotted red line so that if they're relying on color, they can see the red. If they're relying on, what it looks like, they can see the dots. So just be aware of that when you are creating content in Brightspace with the use of colors. Okay. I wanted to show you one last thing with the use of videos. I was talking earlier about the idea of using or having a transcript, and there's multiple ways of creating this transcript. What we're going to do is we're going to do this, create a file, and I am going to use the media library. And now I have this video in here. If I wanted to add a transcript, I could go just below it and create at this point, it would be a heading 2. I haven't added my heading 1 into this page, but I will. So this would be transcript. And I could copy paste the transcript, a cleaned up transcript. You want to identify the speaker if it's relevant, and you want to, you might need to add to it. So like, let's say there's a graph that's being shared. You might need to share more, detailed information so that within the transcript, there's no lost messages if the viewer is reading solely the transcript. All right, so that does, and there's different ways to accomplish that. It's probably a whole other session on how that works, but it is a method of making sure that there's no lost message, even though it's in the video form, if they are reading the transcript. So a perfect example would say, as you can see here on my screen, well, that does, if that's in the video, then that's not going to relay enough information. All right, so what I did, I just pressed enter above it. I want to get, is it going to let me? There we go. I can put my heading one up here, sample video. I can put it in the middle if I wanted to, just by using the center justification. I can change the colors here if I wanted to. And I actually can change my font size to whatever I want to also. That doesn't matter. It's more about making sure that it is marked as a heading. All right, and what I can do is, let me just rearrange these controls real quick. They're kind of in my way. So right now, this is the Access a Quest Towards Inclusion digital accessibility course that was built, and this is the way that we presented it here. This is the introduction, but then within the video, we did an introduction to the video. Okay, so we gave them some context about what to expect throughout this video. And then we used accordions in this one, where you could expand the accordion to see all of it. And you'll notice like he describes who he is, and this we were trying very hard to make sure that our script was descriptive, so we didn't have to share additional information in the transcript. But if you missed something, this would be a place to put it. The accordions is there's a couple different ways to go about it. If you want to get started with them, I'd probably just suggest you let me know. You could put in a help desk ticket saying you want to start using accordions with your videos. I could show you one way. It's in this here. What do they call this one? So there's a layout option. I'm not sure if you've ever played around with any of these. Actually, it's not layout. It's going to be insert element. And there's the opportunity to use an accordion. This would be expand the accordion to view transcript. And then this would be module 8 transcript. You'd want to have a little bit more descriptive than that. And this transcript details. All right, and then if there's extra ones, if you wanted to be using this for a different purpose, you could have more, but I'm just gonna keep it this one. Now I've got to move my controls again. And see if it'll just let me do it. Okay. And then I'm just going to insert it. So when I save this, it looks very large here, but when I save it, of course I did it above the video. Not doing a great job with that, but you'll see. So those were those instructions that I added. I can expand it out. And you can actually, like if you had multiple ones, the student could close it all out. So of course you'd put this transcript below the video, not above the video, but I'm just kind of showing you some different things as we work through this. Okay, I think that is everything that I wanted to show you. I guess the last thing I just wanted to talk about is Ally. Ally is the accessibility checker that's in Brightspace. If you are in your content, you see this accessibility score. It says perfect. The only problem with this is clearly, my example, that's what I put in there is not perfect. There's lots of issues with what I put in there. For example, this module, like we want to make sure that this is, let's see if I can do this. Yeah, so you want to make sure that the headings are being used and that they're working, they're functioning that the way that they're supposed to. Clearly, there's nothing accessible about having a transcript below, above a video, okay? So you'd still have to go through. That's one thing. It's very easy to trick the checker to make it look like you are accessible when you're not. And I guess another example would be um, if I were to have a full page without any headings whatsoever, and it's just worded, just a paragraph, 2 or 3 paragraphs, it might not say that there's an issue. It could just be a wall of text, and that's still not considered accessible for someone who wants to be able to skip through the different sections. So just know that there's always going to be some kind of checker that's in here. It may look different coming up soon, and it may function a little bit differently. It is a good way to kind of get an idea of how you're doing, but do not solely rely on it because it's only going to it's only looking for certain accessibility features. So this one, it should be okay. But let's say that alt text, if I had said students in the classroom and I didn't share any additional information, that still wouldn't be considered accessible. All right, so definitely pay attention to these. If you have something that's in red, you want to click on the dial and see what it has to say about it. But just know that it's only a guide. Okay. Um, I just threw a whole bunch of information at you. I apologize for that, but sometimes it's the way that it goes. Does anyone have any questions about any of the information that they saw today? Yes.
So this is a really weird question, Carrie, and I apologize because I know this is about Brightspace accessibility,
Yep.
and Casey might kill me for asking this question. But is in a course that's is it better to build things accessible in Brightspace or to build things as Google documents that are accessible and are linked?
So it creates a whole other barrier if you're sending them outside of the class. So one of the things we used to say is like if you send them to YouTube, that's not going to be the only YouTube video that they're going to watch. And the same thing could be said if you send them outside of the course. It depends on what it is. If it's going to be the syllabus and it's a live, there's things that could be revised throughout the semester, that makes a lot of sense. But if it's a document that's always going to stay there, rarely going to be updated, having it inside the course is going to allow the most seamless experience for the students. And I will say that Google Doc does play pretty well as far as the copy paste into that template. I'm sorry, into the HTML, the create a file page. The templates can definitely be finicky, but I will say that it's taken some time to get used to them, but I do appreciate having them at this time. I use them a lot more, and I've always been an anti-template person. So hopefully that's encouraging for anyone that wants to try to use them. But yeah, that would be the only time, like that copy pasting might get finicky is if you're trying to use the templates. You'd want to be careful because I don't know, like the spacing, like it's the justification might be 2 inches on either side, and when you go to copy paste, it might move things around. And I've learned enough about the HTML coding to be able to fix those things now, but it is not something that is, user friendly for someone who's just started using them. So, any other questions about it? Yes.
I'm sorry if you already mentioned this. Someone stopped in my office for a second. But you mentioned transcripts a few times. Do you have a favorite application to use to give you that framework for transcripts? Or like the easiest, best way to develop a transcript for a video?
So it's the closed captions. I can show you
Oh, okay.
let's see. It's the transcript is closed captions. The only additional piece of that is to try and just make sure there's no additional lost message. Like if on the first page it says Carrie Mocyk, instructional designer, and I don't say that in my video, then you want to make sure that it's included in the transcript. It should be included in the video, but if it's missed, like those are messages that people could miss out on. Where did I do that video? I feel like I should do a new video page because that was really messy. Actually, what we'll do is we'll go to in this gear up here is the media library. And if you're not familiar with the media library, this is relatively new to Brightspace. It is pretty much like a Google Drive for videos. What's nice about it is whatever's in here you can access from all of your courses. So that's a nice feature. So in this one here, I recorded this video this morning and apparently my audio didn't work, but we can still kind of look at this. I'm going to edit this video, and the closed captions come across the top here. I click on this, and if I had closed captions, I could auto generate what's there and they would be listed here. And all I would do is I would copy paste. It's going to be messy. You're better off copying, pasting it into a document and cleaning it up. Depending on what program, I haven't seen the media library one, but depending on what program you're using, you may have to remove the timestamps, which my technique for that, especially for a longer video, is I do the control find and I replace one with zero with no space. Like I'll go control find ones and I do replace with just an empty space to help clean it up faster. There's some different tips that you can do to help that out. And I bet you AI would be a great place. Like if you need to clean it up, just make sure you're using one that's supported by the campus like Gemini so that it's doesn't save all that information. But even if you're in YouTube, right below the video is the option to see the transcript. There's like a live transcript, and again, you just copy paste it, copy it into whatever, and then paste it into a document and clean it up. So, and you do want to, that's the thing, is like you could copy paste it with all the timestamps, but sometimes that can be helpful. If it's a really long video, you might choose to keep some in there, especially if there's certain like points that you're switching. Like, so an example of teaching math, like if you're switching from fractions to percentages, you might want to say that it starts at 202, something like that. That would be a nice addition to the transcript, or you might put that in the beginning. This video is divided by, 4 different areas. The timestamps here's where they begin.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, when you mentioned getting rid of the timestamps, is that just like out of a cleanliness kind of thing when you look at it to organize it? It just looks better without them?
So when they're using a screen reader, it would read the timestamps to them.
Okay, I see. Gotcha.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you are in, um, it's really unfortunate because I did this right before and I was like, oh, that would be a nice thing to show. Um, if this were here, you know, we as, if someone who is not relying on this technology, using the closed captions can be really helpful. Well, we'll go to closed captions with the timestamps. That can be really helpful for us to scan a video to find out, like, I do this a lot with the SELT presentations because I might be looking for a particular thing. So I know that at 11 o'clock on Monday, there's a presentation I was really interested in. About 2/3 of the way through, they spoke about something. And I can go review the closed captions, the captions on the side of the video to what has been uploaded in YouTube to get to that point. So I don't have to scan the whole video, scan the words instead of the video. So I use it all the time. So that's a little trick and another reason why having it is more inclusive. And then also, so right now it didn't auto generate anything because it didn't work, but if it were, I don't think there's any volume to it. Didn't seem to be any volume. But if it were that those words on the side there, you'd be able to put your cursor in there and fix any errors. So one of the ones that I reference quite a bit is the example that somebody was presenting and they talked about visioning bears. And what they were really trying to say is vision barriers, but totally changed the entire message of the video when they are thinking that they're looking for bears. All right, anything else? Did you learn anything new? Was there anything helpful in there? Seemed like I was kind of all over the place, but that's kind of what this was. I was showing you the different features. Can't really do that in a PowerPoint presentation, but hopefully there's a little bit in there that you can take away. And if anyone wants to, if anyone's using a lot of videos and you want to know about those accordions, I can show them to you how they work. But hopefully took something from it. All right. All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Great.